So in 7.6, this is going to be our last section of Unit 7. And it ties a lot of things together. First thing we're going to figure out is this thing called a midpoint. The midpoint is exactly halfway between 2 points. Exactly halfway. That's the easiest way I can abbreviate it for you. If I think about when I have asked you a couple questions so far, find the midpoint, I'm asking you to find the halfway point. And I love finding it on a piece of paper. Like if I want to know the piece of paper, let's say I have this piece of paper right here and I want to know where the midpoint is. It's kind of nice because I can just fold it directly in half. And that little line right there is the midpoint because this piece here is the same as that piece there. It's exactly halfway. Has to be when you fold something in half. As long as these two sides match up, right? That's how it works. Matter of fact, I'm going to show you there's a way to do it with a ruler. And I don't know if you've ever seen this before, but as long as you have a nice, easy ruler, I'll put it underneath here. Let's say I have a ruler like this. If I want to know where the midpoint is, all I have to do is bring my two fingers close together and it'll find the midpoint. Watch this, watch this, watch. Okay, you can't barely see it, but here comes my fingers. They're getting closer and closer together. Watch what happens. Guess where they're going to end up? Right on what number? Because how long's the ruler? Okay. Well, this one's a little off of 6, just a little bit. Probably because don't have it nice and straight. But no matter what ruler you have, because of how much it weighs, if I bring them in, it'll always go to the midpoint. Matter of fact, that's a whole different tangent. I'll show you something a little bit differently with the bigger ruler in just a little bit, and it will just blow your mind. Okay, but that's besides the point. What we're going to do today is we're going to use this thing called a midpoint formula. And the formula looks like this. Let me put formula. It's going to be x1 plus x2 divided by 2, parenthesis, comma, y1 plus y2 over 2, comma. I'm going to put a box around this. The reason I'm putting a box around it is I want it to be easily found. As a matter of fact, this is kind of when you go back to highlight things like you are supposed to be doing. This is one that you highlight because it's a main idea of this section. How do we find the distance and the midpoint between two xy coordinates? This is how we're going to do it. When I think about this, this ties in what we learned in Unit 6. When you add two things together and you divide by 2, that was called the average. You're trying to find the average distance between these two x's when you divide it by 2. You're trying to find the average between these two y coordinates when you divide it by 2. Now the way this is going to work is you're going to be given a couple of points. Like this is like number 6 on your worksheet. It looks like this. L is 2 comma negative 1. M is 3 comma 6. And they want you to find the midpoint of LM. Find the midpoint. I'm going to abbreviate midpoint. I'll zoom in a little bit, make that bigger. So what you're doing is when you're trying to find a midpoint is you're trying to find the average of your x's and you're trying to find the average of your y's. If you remember how to find an average from Unit 6, then you don't even really need this formula. But if you need the formula, let me remind you. Do you know which letter is which? Which one is first in our ordered pair? This is our which coordinate? Say it out loud, please. X. This is our X. The second one is what letter? Say it out loud. I'm pointing.
Y.
Perfect. They're in alphabetical order. So the reason why there's an X1 and a X2 means there's your first X and your second X. So you have to find your first X and your second X, and you're going to add them together and divide it by 2. So here's my work. I just put 2 plus, what's my other X? 3. And you divide it by 2. That may come out to a whole number. It may come out to a decimal. Comma. Now I need my first Y. Which one's my first Y? Good. What's my second Y? We're going to add 6 to it and divide by 2. We are going to simplify this. And right now, I am going to ask that you do decimals because most of you will not know how to graph the fractions. So let's just stick to decimals because most of you know how to graph that. 2 plus 3 divided by 2. 2 plus 3 is 5 divided by 2. 5 divided by 2 is 2.5. Does that sound about right? So we are going to simplify. 2.5, comma. The other one, 5 divided by 2 is 2.5 as well. This is what our answer is on number 6. If you, I would recommend, if this is hard for you, use the calculator. Use that fraction button and use the negative symbols for any negatives. You can actually type that whole thing in there and switch it to a decimal, and that makes that whole thing easier for you to do. Okay? Now, sometimes they're going to make it even easier on you. They're going to say, this is like number 2. Find the midpoint between -2 and 7. I did the harder one first, and then there's this one. Find the midpoint between -2 and 7. And you're going to have to think about your number line. The midpoint formula even works for these ones as well. Okay? Like, I'm going to show you the long way, and then I'm going to show you the short way. Okay? This number line, -2, 0, 2, 4, 6, 8. From -2 to 7 looks like this on the number line, right? So the midpoint's going to be something with a decimal. So if I'm thinking about, let me do this real quick. If I'm thinking about where the halfway point is between -2 and 7, I know it's got to be in the middle, right? I have to know how far is it. 7 units plus the additional 2 is 9 units. And then I have to cut that into 2 equal pieces. I would divide that by 2. And guess what that is? That's 4.5. That's the distance from the right side to the midpoint, and that's the distance from the left side to the midpoint. This is the complicated way, by the way. That means I have 4.5 from here to there, 4.5 from here to there. If I wanted to know where the midpoint was, I could do 7 take away 4.5, or I can do -2 plus 4.5. Either way, I'm going to get that the midpoint is 2.5. What I want to show you is that this formula that we have up here also works for this. You might think, wait, which one's x, which one's y? Well, think of these as both of them are as x's, because this is on my x-axis if I think about it as a number line, okay? I could do -2 plus 7 divided by 2, and I would have gotten the same exact answer. What is -2 plus 7? Let's do the top. 5 divided by 2. And guess what 5 divided by 2 is? 2.5. This is a visual way to see what we are doing. But mathematically, I think that if you use this method right here, you will be just fine in finding your midpoints. Pretty simple? Okay, let's do one harder, and then we'll go from there. You might have to do these things with decimals. Tim, you have a question?
Can you just do the median?
The median. It is. That's exactly what it is, except on the number line. Yeah, same thing. Let's see. I was contemplating. I'm contemplating. Oh, no. I got to do number 10. I got to do number 10. Here's number 10. The coordinates of point S are given. S is 0, 8. The midpoint of RS, is 6, -10. Find R. So they give you one side, they give you the midpoint, and they say, where's the other side? So in this particular case, you're going to have to work backwards a little bit. Okay? They are, so let's just set up our formula real quick. I know that x1 plus x2 divided by 2 should equal the midpoint, right? So I'm just going to work out my x1 plus x2 divided by 2 should equal the x coordinate of the midpoint. Which one is the x coordinate of the midpoint? Right here. This 6 is our x coordinate of the midpoint, because that's what it says. The midpoint is this one right here, 6. Do I know one other of the x coordinates? Let's do x coordinates. See this one? 0. So I'm going to change x1 into 0 plus x2 divided by 2. And then I'm going to solve this to find the other x coordinate. Okay? So what I have here, I'm just going to kind of ignore this. And I have 6 equals 0 plus x2 divided by 2. I'm lucky because 0 is nice and easy. 0 plus x2 is x2. And since I have 6 equals x2 over 2, all I need to do is the opposite of divided by 2. What is the opposite of dividing by 2? So what is x2 going to be? What's times by 2? I should be putting times by 2. All right, let's do it like that. What is 6 times 2? And that is our x coordinate. If you want to check your answer, 0 plus 12 divided by 2, does it equal that midpoint? You can see if your x coordinate is correct. So what you have to do is set up two equations, just so you know. So now I'm going to do the same thing for the y coordinates. Your y midpoint is what value? What's the midpoint for the y? -10. You have one of the y coordinates, don't you? Which is what value? So I'm going to replace this with an 8 and write it as 8 plus y2 over 2. Now I'm going to recommend when you have a problem that's not 0 that we get rid of, because this whole numerator is being divided by 2. I'm going to recommend that you do the opposite of dividing by 2. I'm going to recommend you take this whole group and multiply it by 2. Whatever you do on one side of the equal sign, you have to do to the other. You're going to take this -10, you're going to multiply it by 2. On the left side, you're going to get 2 times -10 is? What do you think? Good. When you do the right side, the 2 divided by 2 goes away, and you're left with this numerator, 8 plus y2. And all I have to do now is subtract 8 and subtract 8, and a -20 and a -8. You owe somebody $20. You owe somebody else $8. How much do you owe? You owe $28 to lots of different people. Don't owe too much money to people. So now we have our second y value, and we have our first x value. Now we know where r is. R is going to be the coordinate 12, comma, -28. It's an ordered pair. There's my answer. Tim has a question?
Shouldn't the 8 be multiplied?
No. Because we're dividing this whole thing by 2, when we multiply by 2, this 2 goes to the whole group, and the divided by 2, those cancel each other out. We do not multiply that to the numerator at all. Connor?
Can't you just move them up to where the midpoint is? Like count the distance and then just add to that point?
What do you mean?
Like, through 0 and 8, you could just go up to 12 because midpoint 6.
I think that only worked because it was 0. But what do you do when it's not 0?
I did all 3 already and I got it that way.
You might need to show you have to show me. I know that this method will work for every problem that's on here. You know what I mean? Trying to show a method that works for everything. Okay. Next thing, I'm going to turn this over. Because we are halfway through. We did a bunch of midpoints. Now we're going to do distance. Distance. The formula for distance is something that looks complicated. It's called the distance formula. It looks like this. The square root of. Yes.
For distance formula, don't you not have to put the squares inside of it because it's square rooted on top?
No.
You just do x2 minus x1.
Nope. You have to, otherwise you're breaking order of operations. It does not simplify. I can show that to you privately.
But if you square something and square root it, you still get the same number.
See this addition symbol, Ray? That's why you're wrong. Okay? But I can show that to you. I just didn't want to tell you that you were wrong in front of everybody, but I'll show you later, okay? The plus sign is why you can't do that. Okay, so here we go. This is the distance formula. This is what I want you to know. This is what we are going to use that helps us figure out how far it is between one point and another, especially on the coordinate plane. Have you seen this before? Did you learn the distance formula in 8th grade maybe? No? Couple people? Well, I know you didn't because you're not in 8th grade yet. You've seen it before? You've seen it before? Okay. Have you ever heard of the Pythagorean Theorem? Yes. This is the Pythagorean Theorem. That's what it is. Okay? It's the same idea. It is based off of the Pythagorean Theorem. So they're going to ask you to find the distance between 2 points. And I'll do number 16 with you, which is like your worksheet. Let's do 16. Number 16 says, find the distance between C, which is -2, 6, and D, which is 10, -8. We need to find the distance between C and D. It will also say round to the nearest tenth. I'm going to put find the distance, find distance, round to the 10th place. That's what the directions will say. Find the distance, round to the 10th place. So what this formula is going to ask you to do is to find the difference between your x's, square that, find the difference between your y's, square that, add those together, and then take the square root. So, hint. It doesn't matter which one is x2 and which one is x1. But as soon as you decide which one is your x2, then your y2 has to match. Doesn't matter which one is x2 and which one is y2, or x2 and which one is x1, but the y2 has to match with the x2. Here's what I mean. If I decide, when I go into this formula, if I decide which x am I going to start with, do you want to start with the -2 or the 10? It doesn't matter. You just make a decision. Let's start with the -2. -2, then I have to subtract minus the x1. Once I do this, -2 minus the 10 squared plus this y2 has to match with the x2. Meaning I started with -2, now I have to start with the 6. I have to start. The -2 was first, the 6 has to be first. Minus, and this is where a lot of students mess up. In this formula, you have to subtract. Sometimes you're subtracting a -8, which means you have a negative inside parentheses. You're subtracting the -8. A lot of students mess that up. Squared. What I'm going to recommend, the reason why they mess this up, because they see a subtraction sign here, and they think, oh, I already have a subtraction sign, so they put 1. But having 2 does something. It changes these signs. And subtracting a negative means doing the opposite of a negative, and that makes it a positive. Okay. So with that being said, I'm going to recommend that you type this whole thing into your calculator. Literally, what I'm going to recommend is you press the square root button. See how you have a square root button? Then I see parentheses, right? So I'm going to put parentheses. -2 minus 10. So I have -2 minus 10 squared. It will square that. Plus parenthesis 6 minus a negative 8, end of parenthesis, squared. And my recommendation is that you do it like this. This puts it into radical form, but I always want you to round to the nearest 10th place. It's about equal to 18.4. 18.4. Ray, you have a question?
Yeah. So, never mind. You just answered it. I was just wondering if it was radical or regular decimal.
When the directions say round to the nearest 10th place, then we have to break out of radical form. We have to break out of radical form. Does that make sense? Let me see. I feel like I should do one more of those. And I want to do another one. Will look like, and let's do number 18. G is negative 12 comma negative 11. H is 5 comma negative 9. Same directions. So let's see. I'm going to put a big, gigantic square root. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to have parentheses squared right there on the left side. So I want you to tell me what's the first number I'm going to put right here. What's the first number?
Negative 12.
Good. Then I have to put a subtraction sign. Then what's the next number I have to put? Good. In between these subtracted pieces, outside of this square, there comes another symbol. What's the next symbol? Plus. Then I need some more parentheses. What goes first? If the negative 12 went first, then what do I put first for the y? Negative 11. And then this is where it gets hard. What do I put next? Minus. Now, if you want to, you can simplify this before you punch it in. Minusing a negative makes a positive. You are welcome to do that if you would like. I know there's some advanced people in here, so advanced people, feel free to make sure you can do those as positives. Or if you want to have subtract a negative, that's how I did it on the calculator. And we're going to punch all that in. Square root, parenthesis, negative 12, minus 5, end of parenthesis, squared. Punch it all in. Plus, parenthesis, negative 11. I'm going to put plus 9, end of parenthesis, squared. Calculators are going to give this in a radical form. Don't freak out about that. That's a Math 2 concept. We're going to switch it to a decimal and round to the nearest 10th place. 17 point what? 1. And I put a wavy line. The wavy line means approximately 17.1. That means I'm rounding. I'm going to stop your notes right there.